So they stole it. Why do you know where they took me? Oh, I want that. Can I have my iPad?
Well, part of the reason for Zelensky's visit to South Africa includes discussions on cooperation for lasting peace in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, amid strained US-Ukraine relations and Trump's push for Ukraine to cede territory. And it's a historic trip. This visit is the first official visit by a Ukrainian head of state to South Africa. We are just waiting now for the opening remarks between the two presidents, and we'll cut to that as soon as they begin. President Ramaphosa, using South Africa's neutral stance and BRICS ties with Russia, positions the country as a mediator. We're going to cross to the Union buildings now as that address is about to begin.
Thank you, Vincent. Your Excellency, President Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, ambassadors and ministers from both Ukraine and South Africa who are here, and senior officials of both our governments, and of course members of the media. It is my distinct honor to receive President Zelenskyy here in South Africa, together with his delegation. President Zelenskyy and I have met on a number of occasions in various summits, and he's always expressed the desire to come to South Africa. And because of the links that we have had with Ukraine and himself, we thought it wise that he should come. This official visiting South Africa in the 33 years since we established formal diplomatic relations between South Africa and Ukraine. We acknowledge with great appreciation the support that we received from Ukraine during our liberation struggle. We recall that a number of exiled South Africans received training in education in Ukraine in a number of fields and areas. In June 2023, I had the honor of meeting President Zelenskyy in Kyiv as part of the African Peace Initiative. Since then, we have maintained ongoing dialogue between our two countries and our diplomats. We've been engaging together with many other countries in the various preparatory talks for installing peace in Ukraine, and we've engaged in a number of other initiatives. For instance, when the African Peace Initiative leaders, African leaders, were in Ukraine and Russia, one of the issues that we put on the table was a comprehensive and unconditional ceasefire. We also put on the table the return of the children who were taken to Russia. We also put on the table the exchange of those soldiers who were either captured by Russia or Ukraine. So the dealings that we have had with other countries, with Ukraine, have been quite extensive in a number of ways. We have just concluded with President Zelenskyy successful talks during which we exchanged views on how to consolidate and deepen the bilateral relations between our two countries. We also discussed how ministers from both sides can engage to deepen and broaden those relations. We noted a growing interest in expanding relations in peace diplomacy, post-conflict reconstruction and development, and the empowerment of our people, especially women. We also discussed the opportunities for cooperation in areas such as agriculture, trade, education, infrastructure, and energy, and other social engagements. We are pleased that our ministers have held discussions amongst themselves to strengthen the various areas in which we can cooperate between our two respective countries. We acknowledge the significant strides that Ukraine has taken, and in particular, President Zelenskyy, to expand relations with the African continent. We note the provision of grain in areas of food, the expansion of agricultural cooperation, and the opening up of the grain hub to the port of Mombasa in Kenya. These are direct outcomes of discussions that were held when we visited Kyiv in June 2023 as part of the African Peace Initiative. Our engagement today was an opportunity to discuss our shared interest in advancing peace, security, stability, and sustainable development on the continent, in Ukraine and across the world. We have reinforced our common commitment to the respect of the rule of law in international relations, multilateralism, the central role that the United Nations plays in global governance, and the maintenance of global peace and security. South Africa is deeply concerned about the continuing conflict in Ukraine, the continuing loss of civilian lives, the damage to critical infrastructure, and deteriorating humanitarian situation. South Africa believes that the only path to peace is through diplomacy, inclusive dialogue, and a commitment to the principles of the United Nations Charter. This includes the principle that all member states should settle their international disputes by peaceful means. From the experience of our own journey from the nightmare of apartheid to democracy, we value the importance of engaging all parties to conflicts to achieve peace and a just, enduring solution to wars and conflicts. If there is one thing that our history as South Africans has taught us, it is that diplomacy and dialogue are more powerful than any weapon that anyone can use. It is this understanding that informed South Africa to participate in the African Peace Initiative and South Africa's subsequent and continuing participation in the Ukraine peace formula. I had an opportunity to speak to President Trump yesterday, or this morning rather, to discuss the peace process in Ukraine. We both agreed that the war should be brought to an end as soon as possible to prevent further death and destruction. President Trump and I also agreed to meet soon to address the various other matters regarding our relations between South Africa and the United States. We both spoke about the need to foster good relations between our two countries. Earlier in the week, I had a call with President Vladimir Putin, where we both committed to work together towards a peaceful resolution of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. South Africa stands ready to continue to support all credible as well as inclusive multilateral efforts at achieving a just and sustainable comprehensive peace. And we call upon all parties, both Russia and Ukraine, to ensure that there is a comprehensive ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire, so that discussions and negotiations can start between the two countries. President Zelenskyy, as he himself will say, told me that As Ukraine, they are ready to engage in discussions and negotiations with Russia, and they are also ready to have a comprehensive, unconditional ceasefire. This, we believe, is the best way towards ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. So we have today, between myself and President Zelenskyy, reaffirmed the bonds of friendship and solidarity that exist between our two countries. We look forward to continued engagement and cooperation that benefits our peoples and our two countries. President Zelenskyy, I hope that you will leave our shores of South Africa with good memories. Much as your visit has been really short, I do hope that in time to come, you will come back to visit the most beautiful country in the world, South Africa. Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую,
Thank you, indeed.
шановний президент,
Dear Mr.
шановний
President,
Рамафоза,
Mr. President Ramaphosa, dear those attending this venue, dear team members, dear media representatives, it is an honor to me today to pay a visit to your nation today, still more that it comes on the eve of the Freedom Day, a festivity that truly reflects the core values of your nation. This is what unites us together, our will for freedom, for independence, for equality, for respect. These are all values understood in every corner of the world. We are fighting for our freedom in this full-scale war for more than 3 years. We are fighting against the occupation by Russia, against our people being prosecuted again any sort of denigration of our people by the aggressors. We have a very fresh Russian attack this morning, more than 200 aerial targets, missiles, ballistic missiles, attack drones. Unfortunately, we have got losses, destruction at the capital, in other localities. In all of the regions of Ukraine, more than 80 people were wounded in the strikes. Unfortunately, we have people killed in Kiev, a boy and a girl, 21 and 19 years. They were siblings, so my sheer condolences to everyone who sustained losses. While I'm talking here, the recovery works continue. Because of that, I decided to shorten my visit to your beautiful country, but I do leave my Minister of Exterior to express our sheer respect and have all the meetings that had been planned, the meetings that are deemed very important at the level of our ministers, those meetings with opinion leaders, with studentship. We are thankful for your support of Ukraine, for you sharing our understanding that this war has to be ended as soon as possible. This was our primary topic to discuss with President Ramaphosa when he had been on a visit to Ukraine. I remember him saying those very important words about the need to reach a ceasefire as soon as possible, an unconditional ceasefire. I agreed to it. I said that everything depends on Russia's intention and desire, because it is in Moscow where they have to make a decision on silence, making relevant orders to the Russian army. You know that this year, the Eastern time, we had this opportunity of a ceasefire. We were absolutely ready for it. We acted mirror in a mirror way, responding only to Russian attacks. Ukraine defended itself. Unfortunately, after that, Russia renewed its assaults on the front line, the strikes against the civilian infrastructure. Today we discussed with the President the importance to unite global efforts to have this aggregate pressure on Russia for the sake of peace to stop the war. We also discussed the importance of the G20 level. South Africa is presiding in G20, and G20's role in the defense of peace can be much greater. We strongly count on that. It is also very important, our bilateral agenda. Ukraine is keenly interested in energy security matters, in fertilizer production. We have strong results in defense production and defense technologies. We are ready to work with partners on that. We are ready to work with the South Africa to build more modern production facilities in your country for better resilient power sector. Ukraine offers the South Africa to have a joint mineral hub to produce and transport fertilizers to support the whole of your region. There are potential projects in the agricultural sector. These can lead to better bilateral trade results between Ukraine and South Africa. We are ready to work together to create modern security systems for such facilities like your national parks, urban environment settings, new technological advancements in the area. We are ready to talk on that. We are also ready to work together to drastically increase power generation in your country, from atomic energy to the renewable one. Affordable energy is always contributing to economic growth, and I already tasked my professional team to look into a joint strong project between our countries. I presented President Ramaphosa with a list of 400 Ukrainian children. It's very important for us to look after them. They are being kept against their will in Russia, and we have this horrible problem with Russians kidnapping on the temporarily occupied territories, hundreds of thousands, dozens of thousands actually of kids. We need to get them back. Likewise, that we need to get back the POWs, the civilians captured and contained in Russia in inhumane condition. South Africa is a co-leader of a global coalition to bring Ukrainian kids home. I truly hope that President Ramaphosa will help us to bring them home indeed. I'd like to thank you for this visit, for the opportunity to meet you. We strongly believe that the President, the South Africa, all other partners in Africa will help us to stop Russia, to force Putin to engage in the full-scale ceasefire. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. We'll now open the floor to questions. We had agreed that we'll take 3 questions from the South African side, 3 questions from our international colleagues, and the first question will go to Ms. Jones from the BBC. If you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. This is Maini Jones with the BBC. This question is for President Zelenskyy, but also President Ramaphosa. It'd be good to get your thoughts on it. Do you think that this night's attacks on Kyiv by Russia were deliberate, tied to your visit here? And if so, why?
And we'll take another question. Sophie? Can we please get the mic to the front? Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. My question is directed to President Zelenskyy and President Ramaphosa. The issue of the peace process has been a thorny one with different interest groups in terms of regions and countries. But President Ramaphosa, you spoke to President Trump, you spoke to President Zelenskyy, you spoke to President Putin, and you do engage with the European Union. Is there a possibility for ceasefire? And who will be the guarantors? And this question is directed to both President Ramaphosa and President Zelenskyy. And lastly, on the President Trump's issue in particular, and the question is directed to the two leaders. The United States of America in recent time has been pushing for an agreement. And it looks like yesterday, Washington was impatient. Is there a room for the US posture in terms of playing a more productive role to assist and to both leaders? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will take those first two questions, Your Excellencies, starting with President Zelenskyy.
Окей, дякую дуже.
Thank you indeed.
Кожна така атака
Every such attack is not an isolated event.
на жаль,
Unfortunately,
відбувається час від часу.
this is something that is happening from time to time. The Russian attacks come every night.
Іранських шахів,
100, 120 Iranian Shaheeds, or some similar long-reaching
використовує Росія
drones are being used by Russia every night. To say that more than 100 targets they have each night, adds here all sorts of missiles, the ballistic ones included. So unfortunately, I would not try to tie any specific attack to any specific event. This attack of today's night was one of the complex ones, one of the most outrageous. If I'm not mistaken, 215 attack drones, ballistic and other missiles were launched against the civilians, the civilian infrastructure.
серйозний удар.
So a serious strike. What it was linked to, I think, to link it to my visit to the South Africa, I wouldn't do it because, surely Putin doesn't like Ukraine's presence in Africa, and surely he doesn't want Ukraine to build any good, primarily humane, also economic relationships with countries on your continent. Russia has always tried, not just on the African continent, but also on other continents in Latin America, everywhere, practically. They've been trying to be exclusively present in your country, elsewhere. This is their policy of theirs.
Допускати це або не допускати – це вже внутрішнє рішення.
The question if one allows it or not, it's a matter for each country to decide. We, from our side, we are not, pretending to be exclusive. We are just willing to have good neighborly productive relations with your country. This is the sense of competition. This is the sense of freedom. In my view, this is the principle behind common sense. You choose life. People should be free to live where it's most comfortable for them, where they feel they have shared values. You fought for your principles. You've got huge victory. This is what we are also doing. Also, in whichever direction, we should be free to decide who we want to cooperate with, to live together. Because of that, we are defending just our own rights. Meanwhile, Russia, understanding that Ukraine is fighting for its rights, exerts pressure on us, on the United States. This is what I link the recent strike with. We had a meeting in London yesterday, and indeed, the European nations and the United States of America present there, Ukraine, the UK, France, the United States were represented there. There was a discussion yesterday. It did end. It wasn't an easy one, but it was constructive, and it ended not in discrepancies, but in the intention to continue working together. So I'm sure that Russia counted on some huge scandal yesterday. I remember some emotions seeping into the media on that, but emotions, well, they will remain emotions. Russia dislikes any union around Ukraine, because if Ukraine is alone, it will become a much easier target for Russia. Though, frankly speaking, for 3 years of this war, we've shown our big strength, and actually we are stronger than we were in the early days. Believe us, we are much stronger now, but probably it is us who want the most this war to stop. This is our sheer desire. And that was the starting point of our talk and meeting with President Ramaphosa. It was the primary consideration, how to stop this war, how to curse Russia for this comprehensive, unconditional ceasefire. And the second question for our discussion wasn't about energy safety, though it's an important matter. It was about children, how to save their lives. The South Africa has already helped us a lot, and we want you to help us even more. Because of that, we have this priority list, and it goes as it goes. Yesterday in London, again, the priority topic number one was how to end this war. Not how to launch another bout of it, but how to end it. This is what's about the attack. Again, it doesn't work like this. If Russia declares its readiness to a ceasefire, first of all, they have to stop dealing these massive strikes against Ukraine. I'm not sure whose patience is wearing thin and where, but I think that the patience ultimately will wear thin among the Ukrainians, because it is us who are suffering these strikes. I wouldn't wish anyone to feel it, but it is us who suffer those Russian missiles. Sorry for probably taking too much time to respond, Mr. President.
Every act of war is horrible, it is awful, and I would not attribute the attacks that happened in Kyiv to President Zelensky's visit here, because the war manifests itself in many ways and at any time, and that is why we're calling for an end to this war. This is a war that has not only affected Russia or Ukraine, it has also affected a number of other countries. That is why the African Peace Initiative leaders went to Kyiv and Moscow to plead for war and to call on the leaders, to plead for the end of the war rather, and to call on the leaders to sit around the table and negotiate the end to this war. All wars do come to an end, and it depends at what stage they come to an end, and we say it should be sooner rather than later, because the continuation of this war continues to wreak havoc, destruction of lives, infrastructure, economies of both countries are negatively affected, and indeed it affects trade between those two countries and many other countries. And it is therefore important that this war should be brought to an end, and it is a good signal from President Zelenskyy that Ukraine is agreeable to a ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire that is, so that discussions and negotiations can then ensue. This, we believe, is a very positive signal that should be embraced. My sister Sophie asks who would be the guarantors of this peace process. I think the world as a whole is ready to act as guarantors. We as South Africa would be willing to play our role in supporting the peace process between Ukraine and Russia. And I do believe that the leaders on the African continent who went to Russia and Ukraine would be willing to play that positive role as well. For us, it is important that this war should be brought to an end, and we would like to see an agreement, first for a ceasefire, and secondly, to bring the war to an end completely. You ask, is there room for the US to play a productive role? I do believe that yes, the United States, indeed Europe, and of course the African continent would be willing and prepared to play a productive role. And this is what we as South Africa are also prepared to do. We've been tangentially involved in this whole process of seeking to bring about peace between the two countries, as we have participated in a number of initiatives, starting off with the building peace, as well as dealing with issues, what other people may think are mundane, like the return of the children. We've been dealing with that as South Africa, so in many ways we are involved in ensuring that there is a peace process that is effective between the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kate Bartlett.
Yes, thank you very much. First, for President Zelenskyy, do you have any
Just
comment?
an intro, Kate. Please introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Kate Bartlett from NPR, National Public Radio in the US. For President Zelenskyy, do you have any comments on Trump's final offer? And for President Ramaphosa, do you agree with the US position that Ukraine may have to cede some territory to Russia to achieve a peace? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Peter?
Actually, my question, I suppose, to some degree overlaps with the last one. I wanted to ask Peter Fabricius from the Daily Maverick, President Zelenskyy, that having rejected the Trump administration's peace plan on the issues of Crimea, NATO, etc., what is next? What are you prepared to concede, if anything, in order to advance the peace process? And may I ask President Ramaphosa, did President Trump, in his call to you, why did he call you today? Did he call you to ask you to put pressure on President Zelenskyy to agree to his peace plan? Or, the two events are presumably not coincidental. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Nelly and Kanita, those will be the last two questions. If you can just please keep your questions brief.
Thank you.
Thank
Nellie
you.
Payton from Reuters. For President Zelenskyy, the U.S. has threatened to abandon its peace effort if there's no progress. Does Ukraine have a plan B if that happens? And for President Ramaphosa, was there any discussion in your call with President Trump about the chance of the U.S. pulling out of this process? Thanks.
Thank you. Kanita?
Thank you very much, Kanita Hunter from Newsroom Africa. To President Zelenskyy, the war in Ukraine has obviously surpassed 1,100 days, and South Africa has obviously had experience with negotiated settlements to end apartheid. Can you perhaps explain to us what are you willing to compromise on in these peace talks that you say you're willing to participate in, and what you are not willing to compromise on? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. That's the last round of questions. We'll start with President Zelenskyy.
Окей. Дякую.
Thank you. Quite a lot of questions, actually. Let's try from the beginning. Okay. President Trump and his team in Saudi Arabia suggested an unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine did concede it to without any other conditions. Russia didn't do that. Then we had some rumors in the media about certain signals, like before the Easter time, about Russia's alleged readiness for something, even without any specific relations with Russia. Even, during these wartime conditions, we signaled that we are ready for it. If Russia doesn't strike, we won't respond. Then President Trump was to offer this mineral agreement, as we call it. Everything that was outside of the field of the constitution of Ukraine, we got rid of it, and then we went for a memorandum that was in agreement with our legislation, and we did sign it. President Trump and the United States said that if one of the parties disagrees to a full ceasefire, and if other additional steps are not taken towards, then there will be time for some strong moves, sanctions included. This is what we understand, and this is what we perceive. We've accepted everything suggested by our partners, just excluding pieces that go against our constitution. Because the fight for our independence, for our sovereignty, for our territorial integrity, it's about actually our survival. And we are completely straight and transparent on that. I do not see any specific particular pressure on Russia. I don't hear of any new dedicated sanction packages against the Russian Federation. Maybe it's for the time being. We still hope. Without, any catches, without anything, we simply and straightly say that we can still move our parties, our countries closer to the idea of comprehensive and full ceasefire as step one, and we are ready to go on that. And your question on potential compromise, I think it were us who were attacked. We were grabbed some territory. We had thousands of our people killed. We had lots of children and adults buried alive. And if Ukraine is still ready to sit at the table of negotiations after the ceasefire agreement with the terrorists who had committed everything on our land, I already see it as a huge compromise. The second thing is we do not want this war to continue. Because of that, we mean ceasefire as the step number one here. All of the initiatives are important, all of them. There can be multiple initiatives, but still, every leader suggesting a certain peace initiative always starts with a very clear point: full ceasefire. Everything is clear. Everyone seems to agree on that, besides and but for the Russian Federation. Then we have some red lines, like one of the red lines is never forget about the kids. Never forget about our nationals, kids primarily. Secondly, exchange, as we call all for all. POWs, civilians, journalists. The first kidnappings started in 2014. People were being kept behind the bar for more than a decade. We want to bring them back to their families. This is a red line, but, well, is anyone against it? What is wrong with it? It's a right one. Now, about guarantors, who can be a guarantor. First of all, we need to understand what one has to guarantee. We hope that the U.S. can exert bigger pressure towards a full ceasefire. But yes, there's a very serious point at who will become a guarantor, primarily of security for Ukraine, because we do not want this to turn into a frozen conflict that will rekindle in a full-fledged war in 2-3 years. You do understand that only strong countries, only strong unions can become guarantors. I'm not going to talk a lot about NATO, but this is a format understandable on our continent. So if our allies are against our involvement in NATO, we always tell them, okay, if you do not support this, well, you are NATO member countries. Russia cannot veto your decision. But yes, this is your decision. We take that. You are free people to do it, but then please consider other sorts of security guarantees. And we would like to see strong, serious players there. Who is not afraid of Russia? Who has influence over Russia? Economically, historically, it's surely the United States. It's surely about Europe, also because we are in Europe. And we would really like it so much that strong leaders would emerge to assist us to guarantee calm and peace in our part of the world. Now we cannot say actually like this. Before it was possible. With current technologies, I can tell you that with the war raging in Ukraine, there won't be calm anywhere in the world. This is how it goes nowadays. Because of that, we do want the whole of the world to support these peaceful initiatives, and we'd like really representatives of the African continent to be among those leaders to support the end of the war. We had a very right meeting, and President Ramaphosa correctly mentioned it. We had a meeting with many African presidents. Then they went to Moscow after that, and everyone was talking about an unconditional ceasefire, because really there is no sense to talk about any red line without a comprehensive and full unconditional ceasefire. It will rather be an attempt to draw into a very protracted war that could last for ages. A ceasefire is a political will, a goodwill to show the willingness and readiness of the parties to end the war, and other leaders will help them to do it. Some would help politically, others with other tools, but this will be already step 2. Then you asked about potential compromise regarding territories. Now, you see, it's very important to understand the following. The US provided the vision. There was a meeting in London, and a relevant strategy was presented there. Constructively, our team, the European team, the US representatives, they did discuss it. And some bullet points emerged on paper after the US proposal. Another actually document was created, and I think that this format, this document, is on the table of President Trump. Everything that goes against our values, our constitution, cannot be present in any such agreements.
I don't remember really how many questions. I don't remember. Mr. President, I try to answer to everything. I'm not sure, but sorry if I forgot something from your questions.
Yes, there were many questions, and I don't remember them all as well, but let me give it a try. The lady from NPR asked whether do we agree that Ukraine may have to cede territory. That I see as something that amounts to a precondition. And I think what we should focus on is that there is a willingness and a commitment from Ukraine for an unconditional ceasefire. An unconditional ceasefire sets a very good and positive tone to negotiations to commence. It is a confidence-building measure that should be a key ingredient in a negotiation process. So I see this as a great progress. When I last met President Zelenskyy in New York, on the side of the United Nations General Assembly, he was grappling with this whole question of, say, preconditions. And I know that he expressed a very strong view on security measures to be put in place or guarantees. And I shared our own South African experience with him and said that the negotiations that brought an end to the nightmare of apartheid were held on a no precondition basis. The issues that became conditions emerged out of the negotiations, and we never put preconditions before the negotiations commenced. And that was a great advantage to a whole process of bringing an end to apartheid. And I therefore believe that President Zelensky's agreement and commitment to an unconditional ceasefire should be seen in positive light, as the issues about ceding territory and everything else should be negotiated at the negotiating table or talked about at the negotiating table. And of course, once a ceasefire is in place, it is a process that will have built confidence that indeed anything but everything can be discussed and negotiated around the table. Peter Fabricius wants to know whether the call with President Trump was meant to sort of precede this visit. No, the call between myself and President Trump was long in the making, and I last spoke to President Trump in January as he was going to be inaugurated, when I congratulated him. So we've had a second call now, which was a very cordial discussion. And of course, as President Zelenskyy is paying a visit here, the issue of the war in Ukraine and Russia came up, and we discussed that as well as many other issues that we touched on. The lady from Reuters wanted to know about the US pulling out of the peace process. Of course, it is the US that needs to decide on the role they want to play. We believe that the US has an important role to play, as does Europe, and indeed as does other countries as well, who have been making a number of initiatives regarding this war. China and Brazil, as well as the African countries who went to Moscow and Kyiv. So all of us have a role to play, and we would urge everyone to continue playing a role, because peace is important for everyone in the world. War is horrible and must be avoided at all costs. And that is why we continue to call for the end of this war between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. This brings us to the end of this media briefing. Thank you, President Zelenskyy and President Ramaphosa. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing all of you next week during my media briefing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Conscientiously, and the best of my ability. Conscientiously.